Welcome to Spirits of Whiskey. We explore the wide world of whiskey through the many colorful personalities who make it, promote it, write about it, and more.
With each podcast, Kerry Moynahan, a certified bourbon steward and bartender, and yours truly, Philip Dobard, director of the Cocktail Collection, interview whiskey's most important names.
From high-profile makers, blenders, and ambassadors,
to out-of-the-way innovators and remote pioneers.
Join us as we discover the people and elements that give the water of life its spirit. It is Whiskey Wednesday, June 30th, 2021, and you're listening to episode 48. In today's Whiskey Whereabouts, we catch up with Greg Swartz, director and producer of the Water of Life documentary. Then we'll speak with Aista Phillips, Laura Davies, and Stephen Davies of Penderyn Welsh Whisky. And finally, Chef Louise Leonard visits a Hollywood hotspot to dish on some great drams. Stay with us. Hey guys, we're back, finally, after COVID-19. I'm Kerry.
I'm Philip.
I'm Louise. I'm the chef.
Chef Louise Leonard, as in Whiskey, A Chef's Journey. That chef.
Yes. We started shooting just before the pandemic lockdown, and now today, our very first day, you are catching us on set, and we would love to talk to you about how you can help get us from here to your TV set.
The thing is, we've run out of money. We mounted a pre-production campaign, which was very successful. Thank you very much for that. But now we're back into production and we need your support for this phase. You supported us the first go round, or if you didn't, we welcome your support this time. The thing is, we want to take this show around the world, quite literally.
Quite literally.
And that takes money.
Yes.
So won't you help us get this to market? You can visit whiskeyachefsjourney.com for all of the information you're going to need to help us realize this project.
Well, I think it's a cheers to that.
Cheers. Hey Greg, it's nice to have you back. Here we are at Whiskey Whereabouts, and we interviewed you not too long ago on the premiere of The Water of Life, and it's been having showings and screenings all over the world, and so I wanted to see how that's been going, what's been going on, and what's next for you.
Thanks for having me back. It's good to be here and nice to talk to you again. You know, it's funny, it's been 5 months, almost, I think yesterday was 5 months since we did the first screenings, and it's really funny how we've done tons of them. We've done them all over the world, and I've never left this chair. That's not true. We actually done a few in-person events now. We did one last week in Orange County. But it's been an amazing ride. As you may have heard me say, we're lucky enough as a film that people consuming spirits has gone way up and people watching movies has gone way up, and we just happen to build a house at those crossroads. So it's been a really exciting time for us, and we're reinventing the way to release a documentary right now, and we're reinventing it as we go. Day to day.
I know documentaries are hard to make any money at, and I know you did a really successful crowdfunding in the beginning, but I'm sure you had to put out all kinds of money aside from that. So with all of the screenings you've been doing worldwide, have you caught up or made any money on this movie?
We're not in the black yet, no, but we've certainly been doing, frankly, we've been overperforming our internal projections by a wide margin. We did really the first couple of days, the Burns Night screenings we did, the 6 days, were amazing, and that really set the tone for what we're doing moving forward. And documentaries are hard, and one of the biggest tricks I've discovered it's not a trick, it's a challenge, is people keep asking us, and rightfully so, I don't resent them for asking, why aren't you on Netflix or Amazon Prime or something? And we're trying to explain to a non-filmmaking public that this is would be our theatrical run. This is not our streaming time. This is when we would have been on, in theaters at whiskey and film festivals, and therefore we're doing on-demand screenings where we're charging for tickets to see the film because we just have no choice. And there's a little bit. People seem pretty cool about it. We've had no one's thrown a fit or anything.
That's good.
A couple of trolls on YouTube, to be honest with you.
Oh, that's weird.
You keep sharing these trailers, but you don't share the movie. Put the movie on YouTube. That's not really how this works.
How would you pay for it?
But we will. It will wind up on a streamer. It'll wind up on the streamer probably later this year. It's just that's once we're done with what we're doing.
Of course. Great. I'd love to get the link to where it's going to be when it's ready to go on streaming so we can help get the word out for those who've missed any of the in-person events, I should say, and not in-person, virtual. Yeah. So great. So what is coming up for you in the future? Besides the film, what's your next project?
It's very difficult to mount a new project when you're still in a pandemic. And even if the world is opening up again, it's far from open because we haven't been able to do all of the advanced trips or groundwork that would go into doing something. But the three main things that we're doing right now are we're actually making an extended cut of which is really more restoring it. We were determined to keep the film under 90 minutes. The film's 88:20. So we did get it under, but the first fine cut that we liked internally was about 99 minutes. And so we've had enough people ask us about it that our editor and I are restoring that cut. So we're going to probably sell that on Blu-ray eventually. When we come out on Blu-ray, it'll include both versions. So that's going to, like I said, about 10 minutes longer. And then the other thing we're doing is we're still working away on the independent bottling film. Slow and steady wins the race on that, but we're making a complete sort of side piece to the main film all about independent bottling and what a unique niche it is in the world of spirits and really in the world of food in general. I've never ever found any comparable thing in like the food world, the wine world. I know there's independent bottlers do bottle rum sometimes. I don't even know of any that do vodka or gin or any white spirits or beer. It's just a unique thing to aged spirits, to brown spirits. So we're doing that film, and that's hard to do by remote, but we're once I can go to Scotland, which I'm hoping is in September, we'll probably shoot for 4 days and be done shooting, and then
Great.
But it is being edited as we go, so that will happen sooner than later. And then we're starting to lay the groundwork of exploring some other projects that we want to do that are related to whiskey, and we're exploring sort of the farm-to-table movement, or in this case, the farm-to-glass movement, and the sort of terroir-based whiskey distilleries that there are. There's a few around the world. I'm going to the Westland Distillery next week. I'm pointing north right now. I'm in Los Angeles.
That's definitely terroir-based, yes, with the Gariana oak. Actually, we just had Matt Hoffman on our first Whiskey Whereabouts, and he gave us the update on their grain project and how he's trying to, the whole grain project. It's fantastic, and I love what he's doing up there. So I'm excited to see what footage you bring back from that, actually.
Yeah, I'm nervous because when I go next week, I'm going alone. Because we're not ready to shoot something there yet. We're really just exploring. And so I'm going up with a camera and microphone, and I've got an assistant up there that I'm going to hire for a couple of days, my cousin, actually. But none of our filmmaking team is going to be overjoyed with the idea of me being the director and the camera operator because it's just not in my wheelhouse.
Right. All right. Thank you so much for giving us your whiskey whereabouts, and we look forward to all your new projects and the streaming of your current project.
Thank you very much for having us. We can't wait to share it with everyone, and I will absolutely get you a link when we know where it's going to be. We don't know yet, which is actually a good thing for us.
Yes. Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you. Up next, we speak with the Penderyn Whiskey team. We'll be right back.
The Center for Culinary Culture, home to the Cocktail Collection, has a YouTube channel, EatsDrinksTV. Streaming now are Cocktails, The Grand Tour, Culinary Quickies, Music and Booze with Mo, V is for Vino, Complete Greek, and this podcast, Spirits of Whiskey. Find us on YouTube at EatsDrinksTV and subscribe now. The Center for Culinary Culture, telling the story of food and drink, one taste at a time.
Mr. Stephen Davies, CEO, Laura Davies, Distillery Manager, and Aista Phillips, Master Blender at Penderyn Distillery, all operated by the Welsh Whisky Company. Welcome, three.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, welcome. As we usually start every show, we always start off with talking about everybody's whiskey journey. So, Stephen, since you seem to be the boss man, why don't we start with you? How did you end up this big whiskey guru at a house full of women running the place?
Yes, good question. Well, my whiskey journey started, I think, when I was probably 17 or 18, and my father introduced me to single malts, to Scottish single malts, particularly things like the Macallan, Bark, things like that. And so I was a fan of malt whiskies from a reasonably, as early as you probably sort of can be. And I appreciated them a little bit, but I didn't really understand single malts at that age, and I don't think you do. And so through my first part of my career, which was in the steel industry, I would always come back to malts. If we ever went out anywhere as a group, as the management team, I would drink single malts. So that was how I started. But many years later, when I had the opportunity to join Penderyn, and I joined through one of the guys I used to work with in the steel industry, a guy called Nigel Short, who's our main investor in Penderyn, without whom we wouldn't be here talking today, because he's put a lot of investment into the business. And I worked in his family company in the steel industry. So I came along with him back in 2003, 2004. And he said to me at the time, well, you like whiskey, don't you? I know you like whiskey. Let's go and have a look at this. And the guys who had started our company basically had a tin shed in the Brecon Beacons, which was full of maturing whiskey. One of those things where you go and you stand outside and you think, oh, wow, this is interesting, but rickety and rundown. But you walk inside and the aroma hits you, and the atmosphere with the maturing casks, and it was wonderful. So that's how I started, really. I started in the steel industry, moved into whiskey with one of the investors, and that was 16 years ago.
Where did you grow up? You're a native of Wales, yes?
I'm a native of Wales. I'm from a place called Port Talbot, which is one of the big steel towns in Wales. And all my family worked, in the steel industry in some shape or form. So yeah, I've been in and around the area. Apart from going to university in England, in Staffordshire, I've been round and about most of my working life now.
So your investor friend, how did he decide
to smelt his savings?
Yes.
Yeah. He had sold his business in the steel industry, which was a quite big business, and I think he was looking at other opportunities. But he was he was born in a village called Aberdare, which is only a few miles from Penderyn, and he knew some of the people involved vaguely. And I don't think he actually really intended to invest. He went to look at it originally and thought, well, I'll have a look. What's the harm? But really got caught up with the passion of it all, and that's how he got. Because I think he'd readily admit he went there first to thinking, well, a little look, but I'm not really that serious about it. But he just got caught up with just the wonderful story and the ambition of the guys. Even though I think they'd admit they didn't know a lot, but they just had this will to bring whiskey back to Wales for the first time for 100 years. That's how it came. The passion caught him, and then brought the rest of us along with it.
That's awesome. And then the guys that originally started this little tin shed, are they still involved today?
Yeah, we've got probably about 30 of the original shareholders they're all still in. We've lost one or two of them, unfortunately, along the way. Some have passed away, but most of them are still involved. And they've been very long suffering as well, because nobody's ever taken the dividend out of the company. Everything has gone back into building. So they're a fantastic group of people, and they're still with us on this quite long journey.
That's great.
Yeah. They say any spirits enterprise is very much a long tail return prospect.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. You need a very long vision, I think, for this kind of business.
Yeah. Founded 2006. Is that correct?
No, we founded in 2000.
In 2000?
The business was founded in 1999, the limited company. But we first distilled on the 14th of September 2000. That was the first time whiskey had been made in Wales for over 100 years.
Wow. That is 1 year to the day that before I met my best friend. Not that has anything to do with anything, but I remember distinctly, because I should have met her on 9/11, 2001, but due to certain events in the world, we pushed our work date to that Friday. So that's how I remember. Anyway, so Aista, tell us how you came to be in Wales when you're not anywhere close to there natively, and were you into whiskey in your homeland, and how did you get to where you were?
Yeah, I came to Wales in 2004, really just because Lithuania became one of the European Union countries, and the borders was open to travel. So that's the whole idea was to come over, work a bit, travel a bit, probably learn language better, and it really didn't plan of staying it for long. As for the whiskey, really never, well, in Lithuania, there's no, now it's getting popular, but before it wasn't even thinking about the whiskey. Vodka. That's what we grow up on,
right?
as a teenagers, and a very cheap wine somewhere from the parents' cupboards. But yeah, whiskey never was in the thoughts. I finished a chemical engineer back home, and all the process of distilling and the brewing and the food industry, all of it was through the studies was all known. But really, when I came over, I never associated myself that I'm going to be working in a spirit industry. I worked in a catering, I worked in research lab, so it was my closest attachment to the chemistry, but I finished. After suddenly laboratory needed to close down because they went to administration, and I was looking for a job somewhere else. And the job what I was having in my mind, it was obviously lab jobs where I was having experience. I was sending CVs everywhere, and of course later went to Penderyn Distillery, and then after I had the phone call from Stephen asking to come for a chat, and that was my first actually visit in the distillery. It's the first time I've seen the way the still is operating on a big scale, not just a lab scale. So that's how I started. And after, of course, starting working and learning with Dr. Swan, that's how I learn about the whiskey and learn how to taste and how to appreciate the whiskey. Really.
That's awesome.
But if I could say, it was wonderful timing when Aista's letter landed on my desk. I think it was within a day or two of our distiller at that time, a lady who's Gillian MacDonald, who now works at Glenmorangie. And Gillian had worked for us for 6 or 7 years and had married a Scotsman and decided to move north. And I was just dealing with this news and what on earth are we going to do? And Aista's letter dropped on the desk, and she was a chartered chemist and the right sort of background to train with this kind of thing. I was on the phone pretty quickly then to see. It was just timing is everything sometimes.
Yeah, indeed. And a degree in chemical engineering was a not uncommon credential for distillers or people who move into distilling. And we've interviewed any number of distillers and blenders who have degrees in chemical engineering and work in distilling, but got that degree having no idea they'd ever be working in distilling. They just learned somewhere along the way that, oh, this is a career path. And some of the greats, Dave Pickerel among them, a chemical engineer who happened into distilling. It's just, and you got to study with Jim Swan.
Yeah, me and Laura, we had the opportunity to learn from him and just work alongside and just grab all of his knowledge because he was just the gentleman and full of the huge package of the knowledge in the whiskey industry.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, Laura, how did you happen upon your position here at Penderyn? And when you were a wee little lass, did you ever think one day you would be hanging out with all these fine folks working under Jim Swan and making whiskey?
No, so much like Stephen and Aista, I fell into the whiskey industry completely. But unlike Aista...
Your degree is in criminology.
It's actually in forensic science and criminology. So I'm sorry, I can't claim a chemical engineering degree. So forensic science, and I had hopes of doing what you see on TV, crime scene investigation, that kind of thing. I was getting to the end of my degree, and there weren't that many exciting jobs out there. And so I started just being a typical student coming to the end of their degree and applying for whatever I could. And I think by this point, Penderyn had got pretty savvy to the fact that if you put an advert out saying that you're looking for somebody to work in a whiskey distillery, you get an awful lot of fans, alcoholics, everybody wants to apply for it. These guys, it was really anonymous. There was no company name on it. It was a PO box address. It was for a food technician. The advert looked really boring. So I applied for it and I thought, do you know what? I'll do it for a little bit and until my dream job comes up. Next day, I got an email from Stephen Davies, and the email footer said Penderyn, and I thought, I nearly discarded it because I thought it was a scam. I thought, I didn't even apply for Penderyn. I don't know what it is. I turned up to the advert, and I remember my mum saying to me, you can't go to this job interview. It was this random address to a PO box address that they then forwarded me a site address, and they said, we'll put 10 glasses in front of you and you need to nose and taste each glass. And my mum was like, this must be a trick. It's going to be really dangerous. But I did this assessment, and I will always remember that one of the directors said, they introduced themselves, and one of the directors said, do you know anything about whiskey? I said, no, nothing at all. Oh, great. Well, this is Dr. Jim Swan. He's a world expert in whiskey. We'll leave you to it for a bit. And everybody left the room. I was absolutely terrified, but luckily Jim he was a complete gentleman. He was lovely. He was so friendly, warm. He really put you at ease. He just had a lovely chat, a lovely interview, and yeah, that was that. I was in the company.
So
I joined about a month after I started.
When you did the tasting, was it like a test? If you could smell different things, you were in, and if you failed, you're see ya.
Yeah, but what made it really difficult, they weren't all sort of whiskey flavours. It was really strange. So some of them were like household products, clearly to be able to detect contaminants and that sort of thing. So it wasn't even like I knew, oh, well, these are all going to be whiskey flavours. It was really
so they put some heads and tails on the table.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. Now, Jim Swan, was I don't want to forget about Jim Swan. Was he consulting with Penderyn at the time?
Yeah, he started as a consultant, but he had by that time he had joined the board of directors. So he was a what we would call a non-executive director and a consultant. So he would visit the business at least once a month, and he would be responsible for approving all the batches of whiskey that we were producing, which weren't very big in those days. And I still had been working there for a little while, but still, you both had to go through, and the other candidates all went through this nose and taste test. That was Jim said, I really want them. They've got to score quite a high mark on this, so that I know I can work with people who can describe aromas and sense the faults that would be in whiskey and that kind of thing. So he was very structured about the way he went about it. And Aista and Laura scored top marks out of the, I think, 6 or 7 candidates that we put.
Laura, are you native Welsh as well?
I am, yes. I'm originally from Cardiff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So CSI Cardiff is what you envisioned.
Yeah, it doesn't quite have the same ring to it, doesn't. CSI Miami, I might still be doing that, but CSI Cardiff, you can see
CSI Cardiff is a lovely place with a seedy underbelly, I'm sure.
Wales is just opening up again after COVID. We really want to encourage people in, so it's definitely no seedy underbelly. It's lovely.
Okay. How far from Cardiff is Penderyn?
It's probably about half an hour in the car.
Okay. All right. Half an hour.
You can go east-west in Wales quite easily, but going north-south is a different proposition, because most of the population's around the south coast or the north coast.
Right.
But getting between the two, it's very rural. It's full of sheep. It's very pretty.
Right. Now, Stephen and Laura, you share a surname, but you are not blood relations, because Davis, it's spelled in the in the US we pronounce it Davies, but in Wales it's pronounced Davis, and it's a very common surname, is it not?
Very common. I think probably one of the most common surnames. Yeah.
Okay.
Have you guys done a DNA test to see if you actually are related somewhere?
Laura's been doing this sort of, what do you call it, the ancestry thing.
Yeah. So have you found his family yet?
No, so far so good.
All right. Right. And you're not blood relations, but you are otherwise related after a fashion, are you not?
We are involved.
You're involved. Okay. All right. Very good. Very good.
See, Laura, that makes it so great. If you guys get married, you don't have to change your name legally. It's just done. That's so easy.
I know. I miss half the excitement then.
Right, that's true.
Laura told me offline, Kerry, before you joined us, that should they get married, she's going to retain her maiden name. So.
Oh, okay.
Right, double barrel or something.
Davis, you can nominate it.
Stephen, I think, Stephen, you should change your last name to be her last name. That's what I think.
There we go.
I'm really, really willing to do that. I'm a modern man.
We actually had this discussion when our son was born, and we had to decide whose surname to give him. Yeah.
Okay.
But I was quite insistent that although it would be Davis, it would be my Davis.
Okay. So you have a child in common.
2 children.
You
Oh,
have
wow.
two
How
children
old
in
are they?
common. Okay.
Our son is 3, and our daughter has just turned 1.
Wow.
All right. And Aista, you're recently married. Did you give a second thought to taking a new name?
No.
And your name is, what is your surname? Your maiden name?
Yuknevichute.
Say what now?
Yuknevichute.
Yuknevichute. Yeah, so I think the whole reason to get married was just to change the name. Because we lived together for 10 years.
I like your last name. Marry me.
Yes. Okay, so Penderyn,
Yes.
let's talk about the genesis of the brand. Welsh whiskey, grand history, but dormant for a fully 1 century.
Yes, the last distillery in Wales before us was in the north of Wales, in a place called Frongoch near Bala. Nice Welsh name. And they stopped distilling, I think, about 1898. And there were a couple of reasons why one reason, well, there's a story that the owner of that distillery was knocked down and killed by his own horse and cart.
Oh,
which
how sad.
Which sounds so good. But actually, I think the main reason was there was...
Wait a minute. Yeah. This sounds like a legendary story, so I'm going to pour the legend.
Pour legend.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, when we have several examples we taste along the way. We hope that you will join us and we can plug these expressions in as we go. So back to the equine labor revolt.
Yeah, so I think that probably the real reason why the whiskey distillery failed was because there was a very strong religious temperance movement in Wales at that time, and the idea of of working in the distillery was frowned upon, and it was difficult for them to get the business, I think, off the ground. So they didn't last they finished about 1898, and then they were liquidated early in the following century. So Penderyn, there was a long gap between Penderyn and the guy who actually thought about bringing Penderyn back was a local publican, owned a public house bar in the next village, and he had the ambition to bring the whiskey making back to life, and he knew of the site in where we are in the village of Penderyn, which had a natural spring. But he was aware that there was water on the site, and he thought it would be a good idea. And there was our whiskey still, which is an unusual whiskey still, which is designed by a chap called David Faraday, had been made in a like an educational project and was available. To cut a long story short, really, he knew where the site was. He knew to get hold of a still that had been made but never used, never commissioned, and he pulled all these things together. Not really knowing an awful lot about whiskey. His name was Alan Evans, and unfortunately we lost him. He passed away a couple of years ago, which is a shame because he would have so loved to see how the business is today, see the way it was progressing. But anyway, him and a number of his friends got together and they pulled the sort of cash together to do it. And it really started in a bit of a ramshackle sort of way. 5 friends talking in a pub, let's do this thing. I think if they'd really known what they were getting into, they might have thought twice.
I learned of Penderyn via a great friend of the Center for Culinary Culture, and particularly the cocktail collection, a Welsh bartender, native of Snowdonia by the name of Rhino, as is his handle, Rhino Williams. And he owns a high-end whiskey bar in Hollywood, at the corner of Hollywood and Vine, which
very famous corner. Yep.
Rhino Williams, he operates this place, and Penderyn is on the back bar there, and that's how I discovered it, probably 6 or 7 years ago.
So let's talk about the first expression, the legend that we have today, that I think everybody's sipping on already. I love it. It's light. It's got a great aroma. It's very well balanced. I know you guys have a gazillion expressions because Rhino told us so. He's also in a pilot of our TV show. Can you start by telling us what your first couple of expressions were that came off the still and how many you have today and about the legend particularly?
Yeah, so the house style, and of course our face whiskey, it was Madeira finish, and it was Madeira 46, and again it was a huge influence of Dr. Swan, because he knew our smooth and soft fruity spirit, which is distilled in the River Faraday still, and he really knew that the Madeira would work really nice. Because Madeira wine is a different varieties. You can have a dry, you can have a medium, and very sweet. Where our fruity spirit, it works with a medium or sweet wine very, very well. And that's how it came that Madeira casks. It was the first finish, which we started, and it's like our house. And what you're tasting now, Legend, is I like our brand ambassador, Shauna, is always saying like a sister of the Madeira 46 is the Legend, is as well Madeira finish. It just creating to be a more lighter, more floral, and it's of course a different IBV, but it's still Madeira. Like you said, it's smooth, it's creamy, it's green apples, it's fruity, it's a light whiskey to drink.
Is the initial cask ex-bourbon?
Yes, like all our range is starting their maturation with ex-bourbon barrels, and after it depends what finish we want to have. We're transferring them in the different type of casks.
And that ex-bourbon, those are from Buffalo Trace?
Yes, majority, yes. We did try with different, like Jack Daniels, Heaven Hills, Four Roses, but it seems Buffalo Trace, they have really good quality casks, and they're very consistent. So
that's the best fit for it. That's the best fit for your juice. Okay. Now, how long typically, this expression, for instance, how long in ex-bourbon, and then how long in ex-Madeira?
We don't put the age, and we don't want to talk about the time the whiskey spending in the cask. Really, it's like what we're saying, when it's ready, is ready. So when we're creating the batch, in the batch it can be a 3-year-old cask or 6-year-old cask. It all depends when it's ready to use. But average is really it's about 4 years in the bourbon, and after. It depends how the Madeira casks are progressing. It can be 6 months or a year or even more than a year.
Okay.
It all depends how it's working. And again, to compare the Madeira 46 and the Legend, so that's all the influence on Madeira casks. So the richer finish in Madeira cask is going in the Madeira 46, where it's more lighter to medium finish is going to the Legend. So that's why it's a bigger separation. So if you taste Madeira 46, you'll have more body into it, and more fruity and the more heavier style, where the Legend is very floral, light, and light Madeira notes as well.
Okay. The Madeira casks, do they come to you wet? And if yes, do you fill them when wet?
Yes. Yeah, we asking all the times that they will be still left with, I don't know, 2 liters, 3 liters of wine, because through the travel, it depends how they travel from Portugal on a boat or by road.
Stephen, talk to us about your relationships with wineries.
Yeah, we had to work hard to get, because the wine suppliers, unlike our friends in the bourbon industry who really only have one use for the barrels, but in the wine industry it's probably even harder because they use them again and again for storage. So we just had to build relationships on the island of Madeira and keep a supply of really good quality casks that have held good quality Madeira wines of the sort that Aista was explaining. Yeah, it's a very important part of the business to keep that continuity. And all these casks are individuals, and even as we grow as a business, we have to evaluate the casks individually, which is Aista's domain, really. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful for me that we talked about Dr. Jim Swan, and when we lost Dr. Swan a few years ago, you could be forgiven for thinking, oh, that's going to be a big problem for Penderyn. But honestly, with the work that these ladies do, and Aista has been doing in particular, we haven't missed a beat in terms of being able to continue this, keep getting the quality out of the casks. So we love that. We're excited about that.
Laura, what's a typical day for you when you walk into the office or the factory?
I think if there's one thing I've learned is that you don't have a typical day. Will generally be that I get in. We operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there is always something happening. So when I get in, I'll speak to my team and find out what's happened through the night. Have there been any issues? Are we encountering any problems that I need to know about? I'll take a look whether anything operationally needs my attention. Do we need to tweak any of the parameters and the mill specifications or the fermentation temperatures, anything like that? I'll spend some time nosing on unique spirits. So we've got 13 mashes a week and 3 distillations from every mash. So there are an awful lot of samples to do a sensory assessment on to make sure that we've really got the best quality that we can possibly get ready to send that down to Aista, ready for casking. So there's that. When we have visitors in the distillery, I'll answer any sort of technical queries that our visitors have. So that's fun and always a nice challenge. You get some great questions. But yeah, there's always something to do. Yeah.
Do you find you're most at home on the shop floor?
Yeah, most at home doing anything related to the technical work. Yeah, I feel quite confident doing that. Put me in front of visitors and I enjoy it and I enjoy the interaction, but my home is on the shop floor. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Shall we talk about the rich oak, the next in the lineup? Who would like to address rich oak and how it's distinguished from the rest?
I'll carry on about the whiskies. So yeah, as a Madeira, our house style was a huge influence of Dr. Swan. So rich oak again is got the influence, especially the cask connected what is finishing in the rich oak, and it is STR casks, which it was Dr. Swan's project working with the cooperage and creating those types of casks. There's an ex-wine cask, which is a rejuvenated, partially maturing fully, and there's some casks are as a transfer, so starting the maturation journey in the bourbon barrel, and after we transfer in those STR casks, and you could see straight away it's a nice color in it. It's full of tropical fruit. The fudge is a lot going on in that whiskey, and is a lot is taking particular from those STR casks. It got the caramel note, tropical fruits as a mango, bananas, guava. It's really very nice. Mm-hmm. And you could see the influence, or not the influence, at style is a Penderyn style, that smooth green apples going through the creaminess as well, and as you could have seen in the legend as well.
I think green apples and cream pretty much nails it, the overarching flavor profile. Now, question, you keep saying X, what are those casks again?
STR, so it's a scraped, toasted and recharged. It's an ex-wine cask which is being rejuvenated. It's taking all the wine which is being soaking into the cask, but the scraping, the dust, they're going back on the fire. So it's like all those wine and wood through the toasting and charring process is like caramelizing. Mm-hmm. And it's giving really very nice sweet flavors for the whiskey.
Okay, so this whiskey has never seen bourbon. Is that correct?
No, it has, yes. Some casks is starting maturation in the bourbon and being after transferred into STR. But some casks had the fully maturation in STR cask.
Okay, all right. And it all depends.
It's all depends,
and the magic is in the blending.
We have 3 of your expressions. How many overall do you have on your line, and how many of them are available in the US?
Oh gosh, we got a lot. The full range is a lot. That's probably I lost the count. But,
Stephen, do you know?
Yeah,
you're the boss man. You should know the numbers here.
How many SKUs are on your books, Stephen?
Well, if you look at the Dragon range and the Gold range, which are the kind of regular expressions, in the States, we've got around about 8 different expressions now available through Impex Beverages, who are a fantastic partner for us for the whole of the United States. And because there's a lot more talking and tasting going on. It's about 8 expressions in the United States, which I'm really happy about. I think that's a good number. But as Aista was saying, we have a lot of single casks and limited bottlings and things going on which come and go. and it's hard to put a number on all those because each country now will have Germany, France, Belgium. They'll all have at least one or two single casks of their own every year. They like that.
And when one particular brand stands out, as Penderyn does, it's a remarkable achievement.
Excellent, thank you. I really appreciate that. And obviously, a lot of credit goes to my colleagues on the call here, but also to Jim Swan, who took the raw opportunity, if you like, of Penderyn and said, look, if we're going to use this spirit effectively, then we'll get the Buffalo Trace, we'll get the Madeiras. So we're in enormous debt for that. And it wasn't, we always knew the spirit was good, but could we translate that into a great single malt? I'm glad you think that anyway.
Oh yeah, for sure. I actually was on a couple of tastings with you in the past few months. One of them was with the Women of Whiskey, and we had a different peated version than the one that you guys sent us. And I still have a sample of that. So I want to talk about this one first, but then I wanted to talk to you more about the differences in your different peated expressions, just because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, the whiskey you were talking is from our Dragon range,
yes,
which is Celt. And there is a peated finish as well as a peated 46. And again, the difference, the way is a difference between Madeira 46 and Legend, between 46 of peated and the Celt is really the level of the peatiness. So you're tasting now peated 46, so it's very light on the peat on the nose, and it's really the peatiness is a finish. We're getting all our peatiness from the cask where it was peated whiskey. So it's very light, very gentle, very smooth. I got the citrusy notes, again, green apples, that light smoky notes, earthiness. If you compare the Celt, you might well have a bit more peatiness coming on a nose, and it's just because it's a low ABV. Because if you add water to peated 46 to dilute to 43, you will see the difference that 46 actually is more peated than the Celt. But because it's bottled at 43, then straight away then you have a more peated on a nose coming. But the Celt, the peatiness in the Celt is more get sweeter smoke, where on a 46 peated is more earthy peat.
Yeah.
It's more the stronger earthy peat. So that's the variation.
And are you using the same peated casks for the finishing or different peated casks?
We're using the same ones. It just in the peated 46, obviously, it's more peated casks going than in the Celt. So that's why it's the stronger.
And again, the source of the peat is secondary.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We're using Lafroy quarter casks to get the peatiness. So we maturing the base in the bourbon barrels, and after transferring matured whiskey into the quarter cask to get the peatiness. And the length of staying in the cask again depends, the same like any wine cask, depends on the cask itself, how it's performing. So some casks are enough the peatiness getting after 3 months, some of them are 6 or 8 or even a year.
As most of our listeners know, I'm not a huge peated fan, but what I love about your peated is that it's the kind of peat that I would like, because it's not overpowering.
That's right. That's why when we talk about Celt or peated 46, we're always saying that there is really a brilliant whiskey for the people who want to introduce this themselves to the peat. So not to start with a strong peat as Lafroy and scared straight away. Wow, we can start with the hours, and it's
Right. Well, what I like about yours is I feel like you can still taste all the other flavors in your whiskey, where some of the other ones that are really heavily peated, there's so much peat on the punch that after a couple sips, I'm like, for the rest of the night, all I can taste is peat. And then I brush my teeth, go to bed, and wake up in the next morning, I still taste peat. But yours, not the case.
We've just opened a brand new distillery in North Wales, on the North Wales coast.
Okay.
And very deliberately to be able to have a footprint around the whole country. And we only opened it last week. Obviously, we had to have a fairly quiet opening because we're still not allowed to gather in large numbers. But we had the First Minister of Wales there yesterday, which was nice to have some recognition. But the whole point of the second distillery is to bring more visitors in to see how we make whiskey. And it's in a lovely old Victorian Welsh town called Llandudno. And it's lovely. And it's an opportunity to make a new style of whiskey. So coming back to the discussion about peated whiskey, we're actually going to make a peated whiskey from barley that's been smoked and dried and peated. So it'll be something to look forward to, obviously in a few years.
Yeah, barley. Can we talk about barley? That's one thing we have not discussed yet. And from where you source it.
All of our barley comes from the UK. We do, and we have used Welsh barley, but unfortunately, if you know anything about Wales, you'll know that the Welsh weather doesn't include an awful lot of sunshine hours.
Right.
So we feel that we want to source quality barley to make quality spirit. We don't want to compromise on that, and so it's all UK sourced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of spirits, do you make any other spirits? Or is your production limited to whiskey?
So our distillery production is limited to whiskey. The distillery is quite small, and we'd probably love to be able to put a gin still in, but we're pretty much full to bursting at the moment. We've got no space. So our gin and our vodka produced for us, they're produced to a recipe by a third party. They're then brought to the distillery, and we'll add some of our spirits. We'll bottle it ourselves on site and do all of that kind of stuff. We also produce a cream liqueur, so that's our malted barley spirit from our stills that we send away to be mixed with cream and then bottle on site.
Oh, that's
okay,
great.
All right. Do you do any new make?
And rum. Sorry, we have rum.
And rum,
I think. Yeah.
The sun never sets on Siddiqui rum.
Back to your new distillery, how are you guys going to split your time between the two facilities, or are you having a whole different team up north? How's that going to work out?
We've got a team up north who will run the day-to-day, and then these ladies will be responsible for Laura for the spirit quality that's coming out of Llandudno, and Aista will be ultimately responsible then for blending it in the fullness of time. So the responsibilities won't change an awful lot in terms of the senior team.
Cocktails.
Yes, cocktails.
Yeah, cocktails.
Yes, we always end every interview with cocktail talk as an homage to the cocktail collection. And we like to start with, if you have cocktails that you think are good recipes and that you like with your spirits, but we also like to know what you guys normally drink if you go to a bar and Penderyn is not on the back bar, which I can't imagine anywhere near you guys would not be on the back bar. But what kind of cocktails do you go to?
As you can imagine, with two small children, I don't get to have many cocktails at the moment. I know that I was in New York a couple of years ago for work, and I went to some really great bars, and I had an old-fashioned made with Penderyn, and that worked really, really. It was the Madeira finish. It just worked so well. I think the flavour profile of the Madeira, the softness, the sweetness mixed with the bitter, it was really lovely. That was definitely a go-to drink for me.
Right. Aista, what do you think?
I think on our website there's plenty of cocktails with different recipes with our product. Loads of really different ones. But for me, because I got the sweet stuff, it's a pina colada all the way.
Oh, nice. Nice.
All right.
My brother-in-law was making the cocktails, and he came over probably a couple of weeks ago, and he used our with a coconut milk instead of being coconut rum, and it worked really well. So
nice.
Yeah.
Sure.
Stephen, what about you? Do you get to have any cocktails with the little ones running around?
As you can imagine, Not really. I must admit, I'm not a huge sort of cocktail person. I mean, in terms of how I would drink Penderyn or most malt whiskies, would be probably with Penderyn. The wonderful thing about it is you can drink it neat, even at 46%.
Oh, sure.
And it doesn't need too much in terms of drops of water. So I was looking at before I joined, I was looking at the whiskey sour on that Sam had sent you on the one of the examples. I'm full of admiration how the guys put those together, and it was beautiful. But in terms of malt whiskey, I must admit, perhaps being a bit of a heathen and saying I like to drink it fairly neat.
Ditto. Totally ditto.
Then that's a purist.
Yeah. But in terms of one of the things I really like about this job, and there's many, and a lot of people say to me, a number of journalists have said to me recently, "You've got the best job in Wales." I probably have in many ways, but I love the opportunity to work with the fortified wines, and I like sherry and I like Madeira wine, and a lot of those things are not quite as fashionable these days, but they can be fabulous. So.
Oh, yeah.
To answer your question about what would I drink in a bar if Penderyn's not available, I would always look for a really nice fortified wine. If I was going to drink Scotch whiskey, there's a range of things. I hanker back for the Macallans that I drank with my dad when I was younger, and the really rich sherry that I don't feel you quite get now, but you could get in those days, which would have been in the mid-80s.
Yeah, we have a couple of Tamdhu sherry bombs from a previous episode that are they're glorious.
Really,
love them.
Yeah. But one of the things with Penderyn is that if you put too much, Aista will know this. When you put too much sherry, matured whiskey together, the sherry, because it's such a delicate spirit, it can overwhelm the malt. It can overwhelm.
Of course.
I learned a lot about balance in the early days when I was thinking, "Oh, this is really nice," and people were saying to me, "No, you like that because you like sherry, and it's not a balanced whiskey." So we've learned to do that really well.
Speaking of Welsh whiskey, we have interviewed quite a few distillers, blenders at Irish distilleries. 20 years ago, there were 3 Irish distilleries. Now there are dozens and dozens, and more coming online seemingly every day. Talk to us about the Welsh whiskey landscape. Surely you're no longer alone.
So there were 2 up until last week. There were 2 selling on the market, and now there's 3.
There's 3,
and there's 5 in total at the moment. But
Mm-hmm.
we were very lonely for a while. We were on our own for a good few years, and nobody else thought that making Welsh whiskey was a very good idea. People forget. Honestly, people forget. I have to remind them. 15 years ago, people thought it was a really rubbish idea.
Yeah.
And so now it's nice to see the embryo of a sort of a whiskey industry in Wales. And there's 5 of us, and the others are gradually coming on stream, but they've got a very small production.
One day, far in the future, I'm sure about one day you end up with the sort of whiskey industry in Wales there is in Scotland or Ireland. I think that would be really, really wonderful.
For sure.
That's
awesome. Well, guys, it has been fantastic having you all here. I've enjoyed several tastings with you in the past, so this is lovely getting to actually talk to you one-on-one. A huge fan of all of the expressions that I've had of your whiskeys. All of them are great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's great feedback. We love that. Thanks very much for your thanks for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for yours. Happy to drink whiskey in the morning with you.
It's good.
Up next, Chef Louise Leonard visits Hollywood's Lost Property Bar and talks to Welsh owner Rhino Williams about Penderyn whiskey.
Lost Property is, we have a strong Welsh connection. I'm from Wales, and, we've got the largest selection of Penderyn Welsh whiskies over here.
Okay.
So let me rock out a cocktail that I came up with in honor of my dad. My dad and his cousin, they have the same name, and my granddad gave them both nicknames. My father's nickname is Humphrey.
Okay.
So we call this Humphrey the Shepherd because he's a farmer.
Cheers.
Enjoy. Iechyd da.
Oh, how do I say that? Say that again.
Iechyd.
Iechyd
da.
Da.
There you go.
Iechyd da.
It's good health in Welsh.
I love that.
There you go.
My dad's family comes from Wales.
There you go.
This is what I want probably right before I'm about to have dinner.
Makes
this
sense.
Is delicious.
Definitely.
This is a get the party started for me.
Yeah.
It's delicious. Tell me more about Welsh whiskey. I think there's a lot of people that, myself included, have no clue what's going on there in that
So I think the last distillery was closed in the early 1900s in a place called Bala, which is in North Wales. People were pretty chapel going in Wales back in the day. We had drinkers, but there was a big movement about not having too much like hard spirits going around, I guess.
Okay.
But that kind of relaxed, and then in 2004, I believe, Penderyn Distillery started distilling then. They had, I think, one whiskey on the skew. Now they have a bunch of them. What I like about them as well, they come out with special series as well, so they, celebrate Welsh things, right? The rugby. There's another one for an opera singer, Bryn Terfel, as well. So
I want to go to Wales. I've never been there, and this is definitely going to be on my list of places to check out.
Yeah, it's well worth it. So it's in the Brecon Beacons,
okay,
which is kind of, north of Cardiff, basically.
Okay.
So it's a beautiful area, right?
Another thing about this cocktail that is super exciting is using some of the California ingredients. The sweet vermouth being from California, it really makes me feel like, okay, I'm tasting a bit of your home, but then we're also here in Southern California, and so I have a bit of that too. It's just lovely.
For show notes on today's podcast, please visit our website at spiritsofwhiskey.com. That's whiskey with an E.
We'll include links and supporting documents from today's stories in this episode's blog post.
As always, you'll see upcoming topics, a guest roster, and links to past shows.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time,
Sláinte.
Spirits of Whiskey is produced by First Reel Entertainment and the Center for Culinary Culture, home of the Cocktail Collection, and is available via Anchor, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and wherever fine podcasts are heard.